Welcome back to Talent Hub Talk. Today, I'm going to give some insight into what we saw in the ANZ Salesforce market in Q3 of this year. This was an interesting quarter, and really based on the conversations I was having, I actually felt there was more positivity in the market than we'd seen over some of the previous quarters of the year. But the data that we've seen and the data that we gather and release, we actually saw that vacancy numbers were down in Q3 compared to Q2, which actually surprised me when I saw those stats just before recording this episode. I was expecting volume of vacancies to be up. So the conversations were positive. We didn't necessarily see that translating into the volume of jobs in the market, but sometimes there is a bit of a lag with that. So, people, clients, hiring managers might be talking positively about the market because they're about to put in for approval for a new role that might get released in next quarter. So there could be reasons for that. But yeah, the sentiment was positive in a lot of the conversations I had. Not all conversations, definitely. Unfortunately, again, we did see a number of people being made redundant throughout the quarter. So it definitely wasn't all positive. There was definitely some negative stuff in the market as well. But I had been expecting to see vacancy volumes up when we assessed what had happened in the quarter. The redundancies that we did see were mainly with consulting partners. I don't think off the top of my head it was necessarily the kind of SIs this time around. I think it was more that kind of tier down, maybe even a couple of tiers down as well. So unfortunately, there were, off the top of my head, quite a few people that were affected by redundancies in the last quarter. The good news is quite a lot of those people have been able to secure new roles, some of them very quickly. But this, again, comes down to things like timing, skill sets, and also network, which I think is really important. So if you have unfortunately found yourself without work recently, you definitely aren't alone, and it definitely is taking some people longer than others to secure new roles. But that isn't necessarily a reflection on the value that you can add. It's more likely down to things like, location, particular skill sets that are in demand at one time. And in some cases, really who you know in the market, who can refer you into their current employer, who can vouch for you, who you might have worked for before that is at a different company that's hiring. So there's a number of factors that can impact how quickly someone is hired into a new role. Many candidates that we speak to are still feeling jaded and felt jaded throughout the last quarter with the recruitment experience that they were receiving. Things like not hearing back on applications, processes being dragged out for weeks or months in some cases. And I think there's still quite a lot of nervousness on both sides of a recruitment process. Definitely through Q3, we saw a lot of nervousness from, hiring managers, companies being nervous to hire, people being nervous to leave roles and go into the market when perhaps they've been with their current employer for a while, feeling perhaps a little bit apprehensive about leaving a role that's a little bit more secure in their eyes than going into a new organization. And also people that maybe are on the market being nervous that a recruitment process is going to fall through, nervous that a process is taking longer than they would expect. So yeah, just we have felt and sensed that there is nervousness throughout recruitment processes at the moment. And really, I'd like to stress here that communication on all sides of the recruitment process is absolutely vital right now, really just to appease and reassure the other party in the process. So if you're a hiring company and you're going through a recruitment process, over communicate. If you're a candidate that's looking for a job and working with recruiters, again, over communicate. Any moments of silence right now aren't being well received, I guess, on the other side of the fence by either the hiring company or the job seeker. One frustration that we saw more through Q3 than we'd seen in any other quarter were people that are keen to move jobs, but they're finding it challenging to find a role which will offer them more or the same salary that they're currently on. We've seen this be a challenge for some senior architects and developers mainly, especially where people have been brought into new roles over the last few years. So they might have been hired when the market was really, really buoyant. They secured a really good salary, and then they found it difficult to get pay rises over the last few years, but then also difficult to find other roles outside of those organizations that will either match or pay them more. I know many of the candidates that I've spoken to over the last few years who haven't had a pay rise. It could have been 24 months or more now that some people haven't had a pay rise. And these are also people that are finding it really difficult to sometimes get an increase when they're moving roles. But I think if you actually look at their salaries and when I speak to them about the salaries they're earning, they're still actually earning a really good salary compared to a lot of other people in the market. So they're still at the top of the market in terms of pay. So maybe we have hit a bit of a ceiling in terms of, some of the top end salaries that are out there. I haven't seen them necessarily going up too much, although we will be releasing our Salesforce salary results soon. So we'll see what those results show. But yeah, we aren't seeing a massive increase at the real top end of salaries. And I think that's been definitely a frustration for some people in the market who feel the time is right to move, but haven't necessarily been able to make that move because of salaries. And we have actually seen through the last quarter, several people move for the same money, for better opportunities. So they feel they've kind of maxed out on potential in their current role. And although they're not getting an increase to move jobs, they're going to get more job satisfaction, more learning opportunities by moving somewhere else. Obviously, Dreamforce fell in Q3, and I've definitely noticed some really positive attitudes about the actual technology now. Not saying that people weren't positive about Salesforce before, but I feel there are lots of people that seem to be really bullish on Data Cloud as well as Agentforce. And although we haven't had any specific requirements in these areas yet, we are definitely hearing lots of excitement and getting some interesting insights into where some companies feel they can use some of the latest technology. So I feel like after Dreamforce, I feel like there was a lot of new positivity in the market around the evolution of Salesforce and the way that they're releasing new technology. Some of these changes are things that people have been looking forward to, what Salesforce going to bring out next. And I feel this is actually something that people are really getting behind now, especially Data Cloud and Agentforce. There's no getting away from the fact that more and more companies are looking for more days per week in the office. Definitely, I think in Q3, we saw more and more companies increasing days per week in the office. There were some big press releases around Amazon doing it and some other big tech firms. But in the Salesforce space, we've definitely seen more companies expecting more days in the office. We had a number of roles where the expectation was 5 days per week. When I say a number, a handful of roles. And we found that this definitely doesn't work for everyone. In fact, in Q3, I put out a LinkedIn poll running for, I think, a week, where I asked people would consider a role that required them to work in an office 5 days per week. And 62% of respondents said that they wouldn't consider a role if that was the expectation. But that, again, it definitely does work for some people, just not all. So we have filled roles that require people to be in the office 5 days per week. In those cases, the attitude with candidates was, well, I did it before COVID, why can't I do it again? But it is a smaller pool of people that are willing to be flexible to do that. I expect we will continue to hear more of companies increasing days per week in the office, but I don't expect that 5 days will be the norm. I think kind of 2 or 3 is probably where it will land. Probably more likely 3 based on what I'm hearing and heard through the last quarter, but let's see how things pan out. Over the quarter, some of the areas that we found to be more busy than others were Marketing Cloud. I saw a real spike, especially towards the end of the quarter, and I witnessed several candidates receiving multiple offers for multiple different companies. So that was good to see. And I also saw an increase in senior Salesforce developer roles working in-house with end customers. We'd seen government departments hiring. We'd seen consulting partners hiring for government departments, but it's been good to see some end customers coming back into the market, hiring for their internal Salesforce developer teams. We've seen some fintechs coming back into the market, some of the banks hiring again. So there has definitely been some positivity in the market in certain pockets. And hopefully that continues. So moving into the last quarter of 2024, I'm hoping some of the positive sentiment I was sensing on calls in Q3 translates into more requirements and hopefully less redundancies. I'm feeling like every quarter I've had to mention redundancies, which is something I'm hoping ends soon. I'm hoping that we start seeing more companies loosening their purse strings and planning for projects rather than just keeping the lights on and just making small enhancements. Hopefully the positivity that came out of Dreamforce and the wave of new technology coming is going to continue, and hopefully people continue to be excited by some of that latest and greatest technology that Salesforce are offering. And obviously there'll be lots to learn because things like Agentforce and Data Cloud, there aren't going to be lots of people in the market that have any exposure to that at all, with it being new technology. So we are seeing a few people upskilling quickly in Data Cloud. We've seen a few people that have delivered projects in this space, but there definitely isn't going to be an oversupply in these newer areas. So definitely worth upskilling, doing what you can to get ahead of the market, doing what you can to position yourself well for the next quarter and as we move into 2025. People often think that Christmas is a quiet period, no hiring. There is hiring that still happens in Christmas. If someone leaves a role, companies need to backfill that role. I think probably the right way to look at it is no one is planning to start a recruitment drive right around the Christmas period just because people will be off. But there are reasons that some people will need to hire around that period. So if you haven't secured a role as you're moving into the kind of December and late December period, don't stop looking. Keep active, keep looking. Obviously, have a break as well. Spend time with family and friends and stuff. But yeah, make sure you have an eye on the market if you are looking for a role, because the market doesn't close down completely. So yeah, keep busy, keep learning. I think there's lots of new things that can be learned at the moment, which is great. And the people that are grabbing that with both hands will position themselves well as we move into new year. So best of luck if you're looking for a role now. Keep in touch. Please reach out with any questions you have, and let's hopefully have a positive Q4 and good end to the year.